Hello! I am back with part 3 of my Wild Youth series. Again, if you haven't checked out part 1 or 2, please check them out before continuing this video. If you noticed, I did take a few weeks off from making videos. I guess it's pretty in theme that after I made In Flames, I got a pretty decent case of burnout. But in this video, I'll be diving into Home featuring Essenger, and in my next 2 videos, I will get into the remaining 2 songs, Bloom and Alive. Before I start, I did want to briefly mention that I found out that Essenger wrote about the meaning behind this song, and I did read that after I wrote the first draft of my analysis. I'll post the link in the description to his meaning behind the song. I'm very glad that he shared this with us. I really enjoy when artists come forward to give their own context to lyrics, and I personally feel that when artists share their context, it generally adds even more value to me as a listener. All art and all music is open to interpretation. I generally try to approach work with a few different perspectives, and I love having the ability to approach it with a confirmed perspective from the artist. I do think there is quite a bit of overlap between what I am about to share and what Essenger shared, but as a reminder, I'm generally framing this EP as a fluent story. Now, let's get into the Home summary. I actually did a lot of rework since the last post I made on Reddit. I have realized that I put a lot of pressure on myself to complete the series. You'll find a lot of new additions in this video. If you'd like to see the original Reddit post, I will include it in the description. As I stated earlier, all of these songs flow and connect to each other. We really start to see this with Home, as it is quite often referencing previous lyrics. In this part of the story, we're starting to realize that when we previously turned the lights out, we started drifting away from ourselves. Through this song, there's anxiety and wondering if we'll be able to come back and turn our emotions back on. We're realizing that the streetlights from before aren't actually our homes. They aren't our real, true, raw emotions. We need to turn the lights back on and come home. Home is us working together with elements of self through our emotions. Home is balancing all elements of feeling. Home is safe because we feel connected and we feel protected. The song really speaks to the anxiety of worrying if we will truly be able to feel again. It speaks about the painful realization that not feeling is really impacting our understanding of self. It's about going back to our roots and how even though home wasn't perfect, it's what we know and where we want to be. Let's get into the lyric meaning.
City lights, folding the blinds, but you're all that I see when I close my eyes.
We're folding in the blinds to keep out those city lights, but even with the blinds closed and our eyes closed, we can't keep them out. We can't keep out the light because it's inside us, it's a part of us. We were trying to keep the lights out so that we can keep ourselves safe, but we can't stop thinking about what our life would be if we were to let in light again. At the same time, as mentioned in my lights video, streetlights are the things we grasp at and hold on to that are temporary sources of light for us. We are drawn to the temporary light even when we try to focus on growing our own light. It's as if the streetlights are a constant reminder of light. Even when we try to shut them out, we've reached a point where they no longer bring us temporary comfort. They now serve as a reminder of our own personal lack of light. When we close our eyes and try to see the light, all we see is the light from streetlights. We don't see our internal light because we've been neglecting it.
Wondering how you slipped away. Maybe I'm out of touch, or maybe I said too much.
We got here because we turned the lights out, but now we're wondering why we turned them out. How could we let this happen? We're expressing a sense of feeling lost. Streetlights help light our paths, but as expressed in the previous line, we are folding in the blinds. We are focused on following our path and moving forward. Right now, we are very much stuck of overanalyzing our past. In the second part of this line, we are focused on both extreme opposites to connection. We are oblivious to the fact that right now, our worries about if we are overdoing or underdoing it are removing us from actually existing in the present moment. We can't find that balance. Ironically, we're wondering how our light slipped away, but in this process we're getting further away from the problem because we can't sit with it.
Paradise lost in the urban exhaust.
We lost the paradise in ourselves. We let the streetlights pollute us with light instead of creating our own. We let our paradise burn. We even burned it ourselves. For what? This line also makes me think about how, as a society, we often overwork ourselves. In this context, if I think about urban, I think about a very busy, chaotic city that has many different things going on day to day. We get so exhausted by all of these busy, chaotic elements of our lives that we end up losing our path to paradise. It's harder for us to get away mentally, but even physically. We have less time to just go out and explore. We are so constrained to schedules that we start losing our ability to enter these different paradise states. These states of paradise can come to us in various forms, but the one that should be the easiest to access is a paradise-like state within our own minds. We are so exhausted by all of the elements of how busy our lives have gotten, we start unlearning habits that help us keep our mind clear and comfortable. We become so exhausted, we don't even have the energy to get ourselves to paradise. And the less often we travel there, the more we forget the pathways to these locations. This is true of both a physical and mental paradise. If we aren't utilizing our own personal skills and tools to help us keep our minds feeling safe, we start normalizing an internal environment that we don't feel safe in. It doesn't feel like paradise. It's unrealistic to constantly be in a state of paradise, but we need to balance this with the chaotic elements of our lives so that we are able to create the best environment for ourselves.
Wish you could have stayed.
We're looking back on the previous 2 chapters of this story, and we're filled with a sense of regret. We regret turning lights off, we regret how we handled the fires. We wish that we had worked through these obstacles better because where we are right now is feeling very distant from ourselves. We wish we were able to get to that paradise, or perhaps that we could have stayed there.
Tell me again, was it fate that stole my soul?
Just like the previous line, we're struggling to remain in the present, but we feel like what has happened to us was very beyond our control.
When you left with the wind down that cold and lonely road.
This plays on streetlights again. As I mentioned, streetlights generally light up paths. I find this statement interesting in the sense of the song Lights. We saw streetlights as warm and comforting. Now we are really realizing that the paths we are traveling are really cold and lonely. We feel alone within ourselves. We feel we may even have left parts of ourselves behind as we traveled streetlight to streetlight. We keep getting stuck on streetlights because we were neglecting our own personal light. The more elements of self we lose, the more alone and distant from ourselves we feel. If we think about wind in the context of light, specifically fire, we may notice that wind has the ability to both extinguish fire as well as carry it. In the context of this line, the wind may have carried our fire into unsustainable cold places. The wind may have even extinguished pieces of our fire. We haven't built up enough resources to properly utilize the wind to spread our fire. We may know that the wind is capable of growing our fire, but we are acknowledging that in this line, when approached with wind, we weren't able to grow. The wind is actually causing us harm. If we pair that with the previous line, we also feel this is rooted in fate and beyond our control.
Stripped of our leaves, an Eden overthrown.
Like I said in part 1, I really enjoy concepts of growth in the context of plants. Leaves are required for growth. Leaves are essential for growth because they are what deliver the light. We aren't equipped to handle light, and even in situations where we find ourselves attached to temporary light, we aren't actually growing in the capacity we have the potential to because we were stripped of our leaves. Going back to a previous line, lost in the urban exhaust, if we factor in the notion that we stop traveling paths to our personal paradise, we lose the ability to reach the destination. That could be viewed as us being stripped of our leaves. We no longer have tools to properly utilize light. Even on our brightest days, it's hard for us to actually soak in all of that light. Eden can be viewed as a reference to our paradise. Our paradise is being overthrown by the darkness because we aren't able to utilize light. It becomes so dark that we can't navigate to our paradise.
Caught in a dream where the street lights fade and all I know is home.
As the streetlights lighting our path start dying out, all we are left with is ourselves. Home. We know that the streetlights aren't home, but being home doesn't feel real. It feels like a dream that we can't obtain. As the streetlights fade and our path to paradise becomes cold and dark, all we are left with is our home. In this line, there's a slight element of a positive shift. We have a healthy dream or a goal. We just don't feel in control enough to be able to make it a reality. In our dream, if the streetlights were to fade, we are hoping that we can rely on our knowledge of ourselves and the light inside us to continue down our path. Or perhaps, if our home were a paradise, we wouldn't even need to worry about streetlights to guide us there.
You're all I've ever known.
This line affirms that throughout this entire journey, the one constant element is self, our home. In reality, we will always be with self. We're beginning to understand that even when things are getting difficult, we are still there for us. Even when things go dark, we're still able to get ourselves back home. This line is powerful because in the previous line, the concept of knowing home was referenced as a dream. Dreams are generally out of our control, but with this line, we acknowledge that the entire time we have been living this reality, it's not just a dream. Home is all we've ever known. If we feel connected from home, if we trust our instincts, we should be able to get all of those pieces of self back home. Even if the streetlights fade, we know what home is. We know how to get there. We just need to go back to our roots and focus on what we know.
Kerosene, the forest in flames.
Kerosene can be used to fuel a lamp, but it can also be used to burn down a forest, which would burn down our leaves. We're now realizing that in this context, we use this fuel to burn our leaves. We may have even burned down an entire forest, and maybe this forest was even part of the paradise we had created. The use of kerosene used in this line is interesting because kerosene, when utilized properly, has the ability to help us light our paths and fuel our own internal fire. But in this case, it was used to burn our leaves, and ultimately cause us to lose our ability to get to our paradise.
Only ashes remain in this fever dream.
Until we approach this line, it feels like what was described in the previous has already happened. But here, we have another reference to a dream, but this time it's a fever dream. Previously, it was just a dream. This indicated to me that we are actually thinking in extremes with both of these lines. In this fever dream scenario, all we are left with is ashes from how the kerosene was utilized. We no longer have our paradise, we don't have our leaves, we're left with ashes. Now, going back to In Flames, ashes are referenced in this line, ashes inside of my lungs. I couldn't beg for your love. If we progress from that line to this one, in this extreme scenario, there aren't even lungs left for these ashes to reside inside. All that is left is ashes. When we are referencing the ashes inside of our lungs, we are referencing the ashes from all of the previous fires in our lives. But those fires could have actually been worse. They could have completely destroyed us. If we are destroyed, the problem isn't us feeling lost and disconnected from home. The problem is our entire self and our entire home burnt down in these flames. This line truly gives us perspective in realizing that when we experience all of those other fires, the ashes still had a home to go to. We would need to clean up the ashes, but we're still alive. In this scenario, the extreme one in our fever dream, we don't have a home and we perished in the fire.
Nothing's the way it used to be. Maybe we're growing up, or maybe our time is up.
So, first we are again jumping all over between past and future, certainly neglecting the present. Home is all we've ever known, but what we are saying now is that it isn't what it used to be. We are feeling very lost, which has been a running theme throughout this song. We are feeling confused about our sense of home. We're wondering if maybe our understanding of home has changed because we've gotten older. Our lives have become more busy, we have more stress and responsibilities. But then in the same line, likely from a place of fear, we suggest that maybe all of those times our home felt safe and secure were in the past. Maybe we aren't meant to feel that way about our home anymore. This sense of disruption within our understanding of home is causing us a lot of uncertainty, and we keep continuing to jump between past and future.
The seasons went by and our innocence died like the fallen trees.
We viewed our paradise as our home. Time passes and we're starting to understand the world more. As we move into new stages, we see where we made mistakes. Just like the trees we lost in the flames. We lost parts of the forest as we lost parts of ourselves. Seasons can also be a reference to different points in time. So this could also acknowledge that where we are now isn't where we were before. We're recognizing that the events that unfolded really showed us how life can be. We are no longer ignorant because we understand we're less naive or innocent. I think we are approaching the point of understanding that if we really look at those special places in our lives, our own personal paradises, we may understand that we had to construct them. We had to give them significance. We put energy into keeping them flourishing. We allowed ourselves to feel comfortable in these places, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing on its own. This could be problematic if we build our paradise under those streetlights we were talking about. We haven't made our own personal home a paradise. We've made it hard for us to access these little fragments of joy and comfort because they are so removed from ourselves. If we built a paradise in our homes, we'd be able to find it even when things get dark. Now, if we think back to the concept of our internal flame, and we try to add an element of an Eden or a garden within ourselves, this could become problematic. We've already shown throughout this song that we are feeling a lot of anxiety around our paradise burning and about us losing everything. We may resort to keeping our paradise removed from self because we don't trust that we're able to house both our paradise and the flame without it burning down. Now, let's go back to the concept of growth in the sense of plants. Let's say we want to create a paradise within self. This song referenced an Eden, and if we want to create a paradise, we're likely to have some sort of garden. As we said before, we need leaves to absorb sources of light. As we fill our Eden with more plants and more trees, that means we get more leaves. For every leaf that we house, we're able to gather more light. As we gather more light, we're able to fuel our internal fire. In order for our plants to grow, they will also require water. Water is a threat to our fire, but also helps make sure that the flame doesn't grow so large that it threatens our garden. I already referenced wind as well. Wind is necessary to further grow our garden as it helps spread seeds. Wind also creates a concern because it could spread the fire into unwanted areas, or it could put out parts of our fire. As we balance all of these elements, if we get the levels correct, we can really start seeing a paradise formed. However, in our very early understanding of paradise, we probably saw fire as only a threat. We were younger, we didn't have as many things to worry about. Our paradise wasn't so complex. It may have even been self-sustainable. But as we add all of these different elements, we start to understand that even something destructive like fire can coexist with something fragile like plants within our paradise. If all of this were to happen in our home, it would be very difficult for us to become lost. Now, stages of grief. In this song, the theme is bargaining, which is stage 3 of the stages of grief. I truly appreciated the theme of bargaining in this song. When thinking of bargaining, it is often referenced to a lot of what-if statements. We see this consistently throughout the song as we jump from past to future, referencing things like maybe my time is up, or scenarios where we imagine that all that is left is ashes. When I think about bargaining, I also think about elements of self coming together to figure out how they can coexist inside of their home. Housing both a fire and a garden is going to require some bargaining. I hope you enjoyed this analysis. Thanks for watching. In my next video, which will hopefully be next week, I will be breaking down Bloom by Dia Frampton and Dabin. Alright, see you later.